All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Coffee Talk with Liquid Shano. As you all know, I am your host, Shane Lakita, and I always tell you guys, again, over and over and over, if I do interviews, which I don't do a ton of them, but if I do interviews, I bring people in that are inspirational to me, that help motivate me, that I love their story. I love the connection that we may have as friends, anything like that. And the person that I brought in on this podcast tonight is no exception to that rule. He's somebody that I've become friends with online on the Tickety Talks and some of the social medias. And we've actually gone out and had coffee together up here in the great state of Maine and all these other things. And he's a great dude. I just wanted to introduce you guys to him. We'll get into his story. We'll get into his background. We'll get into kind of what he's trying to do and how he's trying to change the world with whatever actions that he's there with. As you all know, I always try to look for those inspirational folks, but his name is Sean. Sean, how you doing tonight, man?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So if anybody doesn't know, you guys know that I'm all these different places on social media. So I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, or whatever it's called now, the X app or whatever it's called, et cetera, all these things. And throughout the whole entire last few years, through COVID and everything else, I met some really cool people, and Sean's one of them. So, Sean, we're going to get things started real quick, just to be able to have you maybe introduce yourself a little bit, tell us a little bit of your story about, maybe your journey of where you've been. I know I talked in the intro to the podcast itself, I talked a little bit about your military background and some of the, being put in the police and everything else. So give us a little bit of a background of you, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of everything that we want to talk about today.
Yeah, I guess the quick Cliff Note version is I've lived here in New Hampshire my entire life. Married, father of two, also the father of three dogs. One of them has grown a following on TikTok, and that's my former partner, Canine Pharaoh. I did I enlisted in the Army about a week out of high school, and I served for 13 years in the Army with multiple deployments to Iraq. While I was in the Army National Guard, I became a police officer, and I served from 2004 until this past February of 2023.
Yeah, man. So it's funny and interesting because I didn't go necessarily police force, but I definitely served in the military myself. I did 11 years in the United States Navy. And, I what I find really, really amazing to me on these apps is how a lot of your military community, a lot of your folks that are either veterans or people that are, and even in the police aspect of it, because I hang with a lot of folks there too, but a lot of your veterans or military background or those kind of things, I feel like they congregate together a little bit, and we all kind of bring some of that old camaraderie and things like that I know I miss. So let's talk a little bit about that. You served in which one? The Army? Is that what it was? Army?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And what did you do in the Army?
So when I first started out in the Army, I was a signals intelligence soldier. So I was in the Army intelligence field, and I did that for a couple of years, and deployed to Iraq during the ground war in 03, 04. And then I went back as a National Guardsman in 2009, 2010 as a medevac crew chief on Black Hawk helicopters.
Oh wow, Blackhawks. Those are the big beasts, man. I love those things. So
yeah,
you went from being a signalman to to medical. You worked in the medical field.
Well, I worked in the medical field. I was very minimally medically trained. I was a crew chief, so realistically, my job in the Army as a 15 Tango is I was a UH-60 helicopter repairer. So I was a wrench monkey for about a year or so before I got accepted onto flight status. And at that point I became a crew chief, and the crew chief on Black Hawk helicopters, they fly with the helicopter.
Okay. Nice, man. Nice.
I was flight crew.
I didn't know all that. So you were active duty, and then did I hear you right saying that you went back as a reserve, like a reservist, or did you go back active? Were you active duty the whole time?
No, actually, the only time I was active duty was when I was on orders. I actually started my my career as an Army reservist,
Okay.
and then I converted from the reserves to the National Guard. The big difference between the two of them is they're both like a part-time status, the 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year deal. But the reserves is federally funded. The National Guard is state funded.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. Oh, that's cool, man. I didn't know that. I know that. I mean, I even recommended it to my kid. My kid's just now 18 years old, and I told him, I said, listen, if it's an avenue you want to go in, you don't have to go active duty. You can go reservist. You can go National Guard. You can go all these different avenues if you wanted to. Right? He's taking a little bit of a gap year and stuff like that. My whole family's all military. My father was military. My grandfather, my uncle, my aunt, myself, everybody was all either served a lot of time or even just did their small service of 4 years, and then they got out. So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you very much for your service to the country. Sean, you and I have talked about this before, about the military service and things like that. If you were to think of one thing while you're in the military, if you can look back on it now, right? Because as we look back on our life and we take a look at different things that we've been through or things that we've overcome or anything like that, what would be the one thing that you miss the most about being in the military?
The thing I miss the most is probably, I mean, hands down, just like almost every other veteran, it's the camaraderie. It's the family, the extended family that you develop. And it's not even just for me as being an Army soldier, is I also developed family, especially overseas with Marines, a bunch of Marines, a couple Navy SEALs, stuff like that. And even to realize that we all have different jobs, whether your job is specifically just to be a badass or your job is just to be some sort of support. We're all a cog in the wheel, and everybody understands that. And, so nobody looks down on one another. And I miss that it didn't matter what you did. Everybody was on an equal playing field.
Right. And that's gone in regular society, isn't it? Like if you're out there in the real workforce, as everybody knows, you go to work, but there's none of that whole everybody coming to one common goal. We're all pulling together. I got your back, you got my back, or whatever, because everybody's pretty much either out for themselves or they all go in their own little lane and they don't want to mess with anybody or say anything that's going to piss someone off or whatever else. But I miss that too, man. I miss the fact that I know that the guy to my right or girl to my right or to my left legitimately has my back no matter what's going on. And now listen, I was in the Navy. Don't get me wrong. I parked on ships. I wasn't out there in the conflict of all those things. But even being in the Navy, we had to be operational for our Marines and our Army folks to be able to go out there in the field and do whatever. When I was in Somalia, Bosnia, Iraq, all these things, like we had to have all the comms up and running for these guys to be super successful when they're out there. So I knew that I had a huge amount of responsibility that I had to do for these folks that were hitting the beach. And then they also had a huge responsibility to me to keep me in the loop of what's going on, how it's feeling, where we're going. So I don't see that anymore. I don't see the camaraderie and that connection that people have while we're in the military. I think that's probably why we miss that one part of it the most out of all of it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And that's why you'll find that a vast majority of your local firefighters or police officers are veterans.
Right.
And the reason why is because you still get that camaraderie, whether you're running into a burning building or, you're chasing to the woods after a suspect, that person that's with you, I guess in the grand scheme of things, they're willing to either die for you or keep you from doing it.
Right. Isn't that's crazy to me though, when you really think about it? Like people put their life on the line for you, and you would put your life on the line for them. And there's like you said, I love the fact that that's a great transition, right? Going from the military, feeling that camaraderie or whatever, and then like you said, when they all come back home, a lot of them will go in to do things like firefighting or police. My sister's a police officer as well. She never went in the military, but I think that's her form of military. You know what I mean? Like my dad was military. I was military. We were all in the armed forces. She went directly into the police force, and she loves it. She's been now, I think I just saw a post the other day that said that she's over 20 years where she's at right now. She's up for retirement here real soon. She's loving, the whole dynamic of it all. But one of the things that she brings up are all the people, whether she's lost them through line of fire and things like that, or whether it's the family that they feel so close and such a tight knit together. I think that's really important. I wish that everybody, to be honest with you, if it was a soapbox moment and a moment that you could put on a platform, everybody could either serve in the military, serve on the police force, or even, and here's an even a grander scheme of it all, serve in retail to be able to serve customers, because not only do you have to go into the trenches with other people to get things done, but then you have to deal with some really unruly customers to be able to do so. So I think all three of those are great areas for people to get into, to be able to just learn how to work with each other, which I don't necessarily know if we do very much of these days, you know?
I couldn't agree with you more. I think today's day and age, it's just one of those things of, what's best for me, and it doesn't matter about other people. And that's where society right now is extremely wrong. That it is about you, but it's also about other people, and you can't forget about the other people too.
Right.
Early on in my law enforcement career, I was your typical rookie that I wanted to put everybody in jail. Everybody was a bad guy. And it wasn't until probably five or so years into my career that I realized that, quite frankly, it doesn't matter what the crime is. I mean, anything from stealing a candy bar to just flat out murder, it's still a person that's doing it. There's still a person. There's still a soul there. Whether it's a good soul or a dark soul, it's still a person.
Mm,
And my parents are extremely old school, so I was always growing up with that phrase. You get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar.
right.
And I found that no matter what happened, as long as I treated, the bad guys, if you will, with the same respect as I treated, the little old lady that I'm helping cross the road, you get a lot more out of it, and you're a lot less likely to, get punched in the face or spit on or something like that. I had a little trick in my bag, and you take somebody to jail, they're not allowed to bring cigarettes and lighters and stuff in there, so they end up just throwing them away. Well, I never threw them away. I kept them in my cruiser, and you'd be surprised that if someone's like, I wish I had a cigarette right now, you could say, well, I got one in my cruiser.
Mm,
Sit here and have a cigarette and relax. And they're like, are you serious? Yeah, absolutely. And those people, even people that were a 10, like they were ramped up. You give them a cigarette and just let them chill out, they'll put the handcuffs on themselves.
right.
Treat people the way you'd want to be treated.
Mm.
It's really, really not that hard to do.
Well,
It
I
really
mean,
isn't.
is it well? So first of all, I commend you on that, because that's a pretty big deal, right? For you to be able to come to a decision, or even a moment in your time, whether it's from when you started, or even after you first got started, for you to make a conscious decision to be able to invest in other people in a way that makes them feel human and makes them feel like, you know what I mean? Because we don't know their story. We don't know
Right.
exactly what they've been through. We don't know their lifestyle. We don't know how they grew up. Maybe they got no family. Maybe they got no parents. Maybe they have nothing going on. Maybe their whole dynamic is that their life has led this direction anyway. So they just figure it to be normal that's there.
Hmm.
And for you to be able to step into that situation and show compassion, or some sense of, I'm going to humanize you, to be able to make sure that you know that I actually care. I'm not just somebody that's wearing a badge that wants to take you down. You know what I mean? I'm somebody that's here to be able to not only protect and serve, but the serve part of it is the part where you are literally sitting down with them to say, "Hey, you're human, and I get it." You know what I mean?
Hmm.
That probably goes so far. You know?
It really does. Yeah, it really does. Because later on, um, if there's a volatile situation and one of those people is there, 9 times out of 10, they'll look at somebody else and go, no, not that one. Like he's good people. Like, he's the real deal. Like that type of thing. And I've had people that, I've arrested for DUI. One of them specifically was a truck driver. Like that's his career. That's how he feeds his family. But I didn't put the bottle to his head and pull the trigger. That was his decision.
Right.
But I still treated him with the respect and everything, to the point that once I dropped him off at the jail, like he thanked me,
Right.
and I'll never forget it. Like he sincerely thanked me, shook my hand, and looked at me and said, "I could have killed somebody tonight."
Mm, mm.
And you don't, especially, in an intoxicated state, you don't get somebody that has that little come to Jesus moment on their
No.
own and admit it,
Right.
I've had people who are like, my wife said if I get another DUI, she's going to leave me, and there is a sense of compassion that's there for people that are just in shitty situations. But there's also that side of the law, like, I didn't make them do this.
Right.
I didn't force them to drink. I didn't force them to drive. They made that decision of I'm good to go, but they're not.
Right.
And they very well could have killed somebody. I mean, it happens on a daily basis in this country alone that drunk drivers are killing people.
Right.
And people always wonder. They're like, well, how come nothing ever happens to the drunk driver? Well,
Mm.
it's very simple because their reaction time's a lot slower than yours. They don't anticipate it, so they don't lock themselves up and everything. So a lot of times they bounce around the car, like a bouncing ball. Then they get out and kind of go, "Wow, what the heck just happened?"
Right.
Um,
While
and
there's carnage and mayhem on the other end of who they just hit or anything like that. Right. Yeah.
Correct. And even though in probably 99% of the world's eyes, that's a bad person,
Right.
but the key word is there's person. It's still a person.
Yes.
And we have police in this world because as humans, we're bound to make mistakes. We're bound to screw up. That's what we do.
Right.
But it's how you dust yourself off when you do screw up that really makes you that true person.
Well, unfortunately, what I always see, I mean, what you see portrayed on national media, what you see on the news outlets, what you see everywhere are those minor amounts of situations. Because I feel, and this is just my own personal opinion, and I could be wrong. I've been known to be wrong before, but um, but the situation where you bring compassion to the table, everybody that I've ever known, like my sister and my brother-in-law and whatever else, are the same exact way. My brother-in-law works in the jail, and he works with all the inmates, and these guys are coming in, they're off the streets, they're like, they're wound for sound or whatever, and he has an ability to be able to sit in the cell with these guys and just have conversations and just sit down with them and say, hey, listen, I know it sucks and I know it's there. Even the repeat ones, the ones that, have been in multiple times and things like that, they know him by his first name. They sit down and they talk to each other and they have a relationship. And he just, whether it's just a small little impact that he makes at that moment in time, I see compassion and energy. And so a lot of times when I see things on TV where you see like the ones that are broadcast everywhere, whether they're recorded or over exertion of force or any of those kind of things, unfortunately, it gives the whole entire gambit a bad name. And individuals like you or my brother or my sister and those folks that care and empathize with people, I legitimately feel that they're shut down. The noise isn't loud enough on the compassionate, true side of serving the public and doing the things that are necessary and making people feel human. We don't raise that up enough. You know what I mean? It's not like legitimately there's so many good stories, but all we hear about are the ones that are plastered on the TV and in the courtrooms. You know what I mean? It's unfortunate.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I mean, the other side of it too is that, it's just what you said, is that it's always plastered on the TV and everything, but when a police officer makes a mistake, whether it's a legitimate mistake or they really screw up,
Right.
Police have the power to take away your rights as a citizen. That's a huge responsibility,
It is.
Plus the law books are never thin. And they're always changing. Police are going to screw up. Somebody's going to get the wrong crime. Somebody's going to make a mistake. It's going to happen.
Right.
Because again, we're human. That's what we do. But I don't know about you, but I've been shortchanged at McDonald's before, and I haven't held it up to every McDonald's I've ever been to and said, I want you to count this out loud to me because the last person I went to, they shortchanged me by $1.
Right.
It is what it is. But it's $1. It's really not that big of a deal. But when it comes to your rights, that's a huge, huge deal.
Right.
Being able to take away your freedom, first off, from a police officer standpoint, is not something to be taken lightly.
Right.
That's like having the key to the nuclear weapons in this country. That's a big deal. And if you make a mistake doing that, it's going to have a ripple effect.
So
But it's going to get broadcast, and especially right now with the media, that's what sells.
you're
You
right.
know, it's a generational thing. Eventually, things will come around. It happens. Police aren't perfect, but they have to be as close to perfect as they can be because, when you see a police officer, you expect that police officer to obey all the laws at all times. You expect them to be the most upstanding citizen in your community at all times. But cops make mistakes too,
Right.
and some of them make grave mistakes. And the ones that go out there and do it maliciously should absolutely spend time behind bars
Oh
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, there needs to be a level of accountability with anything. With
Hmm.
anything, right? I mean, if you're working in a restaurant and you spit in someone's food or you do whatever, not to say that that's jailable offense, but at the end of the day, like you shouldn't treat people that way. You should be held
Absolutely.
accountable to your actions or whatever else that's there. And so there's this balance that we're in, right? Especially with our police and with our different folks that are out there, where, like you said, I really like what you just said a minute ago, where there's a huge responsibility and weight and burden that's put on your shoulders about the fact that at any given time your rights can be taken away by me.
Hmm.
So you wonder if sometimes that gets in people's heads, right? It gets a little bit of that whole I'm bigger than you, I'm better than you, and those kind of things. And I know because I saw it in the military. There
Yep.
was some guys that were meatheads in the military, right? And I used to be like, oh man, I'm not hanging out with the meathead. I'm gonna go do my thing and hang out with the grunts and the people that are all working hard and we're pulling together. But you had your meatheads that always let that power go to their heads and they did whatever. And unfortunately, when you have a sense of power in any kind of position, these types of things do happen. It's a human psyche. It's how fragile you are in your own worth and where you're at. Now, all of a sudden, you've got this power, and now you're like, oh, I'm the man now, or I'm the woman. I can do whatever I want. When in all actuality, your approach to the responsibility that you have to be able to carry this forward is so monumental and huge. You need to really cherish that and be able to understand that me and you, we're on the same playing field. There's no above you or below you or anything like that. We're just human beings and we're just trying to get through this rat race. And I love and I appreciate your approach to it when you were just saying that. That was pretty great.
Yeah. Thanks. I mean, I'm sure I don't speak for all police officers, about stuff like that, but these are my personal beliefs. And I spent some time training other police officers, and a couple of them just didn't make it in the career. But those that did are doing very, very well. And it's nice to be able to pass on my beliefs to some of the newer era police officers. To understand it's an important job, and this isn't like having keys to the store so you can lock up at the end of your shift. I mean, these are the keys to people's lives,
Right.
you know um and it's definitely to be taken seriously, and it's just one of those things that if you can't take that type of responsibility, you got to go.
Right. It's time to
you
step
know
down, right? Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yep.
So were you always canine? Like when you
No.
no, you weren't. So it took you a little bit of time to kind of did you have Pharaoh before and then become canine or like how did that happen? How did you have the whole thing pan out with the dog?
So it's actually a really brief but cool story. Is um I got I got a phone call from the chief at my last agency, and he said that the agency's fallen apart, and I've been tasked to help rebuild it, and I need a solid number two to help me. And I said, yeah, I'd be honored to do so. And it's a small agency, small town, um, and this chief was a canine handler at his previous agency, and it's something I've always wanted to do. And we had talked about it, and I was like, "Hey, what do you think the odds are that they'd let us get a dog here?" And he's like, "I don't know. I have no idea." And during one of the meetings, one of the members of the select board actually looked at the chief and legitimately said, "Why don't we have a dog?"
Hmm.
And the chief goes, I don't know. And he's like, well, you were a canine handler. And she's like, I'm not working a dog anymore. However, I've got this guy who would love to work a dog. And they're like, make it happen. So we started searching for dogs and everything. And obviously, being a small PD in a small town, we had a limited budget. And there was a former chief um, that rescued this dog that washed out of the Ohio State Highway Patrol, and was willing to sell us this dog for like $2,000. And it's a $10,000-$12,000 dog with all the training and everything.
Right. So he's
And
already
so
trained.
so they come over. They're still rather green, but he came over with some basic training, obviously some obedience and everything. Came over from Hungary, and I went over and took a look at him and immediately fell in love with him. And he's not much of a people person, but he took to me really quickly. And I spent probably a half hour playing ball with him, and I just head over heels just fell in love with this dog and was like, I got to have this dog.
Is he a
So I
German
talked
Shepherd?
to.
Is he a German Shepherd or is he?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
Yep. He's a German Shepherd. And I went to the chief and said, "Hey, I found a dog." And he's like, "Cool. How much?" And I told him, and he's like, "That's it." I said, "That's it." I'm like, he washed out of the Ohio State Highway Patrol, and he goes, "For what?" And I said, "He's skittish on slippery floors."
Hmm.
And they're like, "Okay, like we can work with that." I was like, "He can overcome that." But the thing is that he's got to be with a handler that's going to be confident and that's going to put his heart and soul into it, which this has been a dream of mine since I was
Yeah.
6 years old.
Right.
I'm going to put my heart and soul into this. And so we pulled the trigger on it, and I got paired up with Pharaoh, and we started going through some training and got certified rather quickly. And we became a very, very strong bond. That now that we're both retired, he lives with me here at home.
Yeah.
And he's still very much in his prime. And I still do some training with him. Matter of fact, I haven't done anything narcotics related with him in probably 4 or 5 months. And I put a small hideout and just kind of let him go outside and just let him do his typical dog stuff. And he ran around, and all of a sudden, I just watched his nose come up and his tail went up at the same time. And I was like, he's an odor. Like,
Yeah.
he still got it. And he did it. He weaseled his way in and then found it, walked up, turned and looked at me and just stared. And I was like, where is it? And he continued to look at me and go, show me. And he touches it with his nose and looks back at me. And I was like, yeah, he still got it. He still got it.
That's awesome, man. Well, so I have a question for you about that, though, because I have a buddy of mine that lives in my neighborhood that was a canine cop up here in Scarborough as well. And he had a dog, or he has a dog, and they had to retire the dog because it's just getting older, right? Like it was a golden lab. It was beautiful. It did all, it was just really, really cool. And his name is Deacon. And basically he had to pull him off the mark and say, okay, I'm going to retire you at home, even though he continues to be a cop, and he's actually a fire investigative team through the police force, so he kind of works with the fire department and everything else. But he's just kind of doing his own thing. I asked him if he's getting another dog, and he said no, I'm all set, but I'm just going to work to retirement and then I'm all set. And he's having a really, really difficult time knowing that the dog is no longer by his side 24/7 everywhere he goes. And for him, I could see it. We were playing cornhole the other day in his driveway, and I was just talking to him, and he's like, I just don't know how to process this, because he's been by my side for so long, and he's been the only one that I can talk to really on some of those nights and whatever else that was there. And now I don't have that. So with you both retiring, which is good because you guys are both right there together, right? I mean, pretty much, yeah, for the most part. How do you feel about that? Like actually getting to the point where you're not, even though you said he still got it, but it's still tough, right? I mean, it's still difficult to see that no longer are we doing what we were doing for as many years as we were.
Yeah, it's tough, but I mean, now that now that I'm out of law enforcement, I'm doing flooring now, and I can't take him with me.
Right.
And so we went from wherever I went, he went. You
Yep.
know, even if I was running to the local grocery store to get some groceries or whatever, he jumped in the truck. He went with me, and I remember taking. I think I coached my son's hockey team, and we went away for a weekend for a tournament, and that was the first time since Farrell and I got paired up that we were away, and that was probably a year or so, well, maybe about 8 months into our career together, and I had anxiety leaving him.
Yeah.
Um, he's not my partner. He's my best friend. He's my lifeline. He's my ride or die.
Right.
And so Farrell's still very young. Like I said, he's still in his prime, and um, I'm currently trying to raise money and stuff that because I want him to get retrained as my service dog, so that he still has the ability to go everywhere. Because I do get that separation anxiety from him. I never really knew that was a thing, and deep down inside, I almost wonder if some of these canine guys that get another dog, if that's why they do it.
Mm.
Um, but the worst part is that you build this bond that's first off it's unbreakable, and you'll never see a bond with a dog um, that that works in law enforcement that has a handler. Whether it's search and rescue or law enforcement, you'll never see a bond like that with a dog. As dog owners, people have these bonds with their dogs, which are great, but they don't rely on these dogs.
Right.
you know so that's where it becomes really, really tough.
Yeah, it's
And
just like when you're in the military, you had a person to your left and to your right. This dog was to your left and to your right. Life depended on this dog, and of course, Pharaoh's life depends on you. You know what I mean? So
correct.
legit, you guys just had that extreme caring and loving bond between the two of you that you knew when you were going in the trenches, you got each other's back. You know what I mean? That's
Yep.
amazing.
Yep. Yeah, because it's not it's I like to say it's not a canine unit, it is a canine team. We are a team.
Yeah.
I'm his eyes and he's my nose.
Yep.
When he's tracking and everything, he's not using his eyesight, he's using his nose, he's using his natural instincts. But I'm his eyes. Because he'll continue tracking right across a busy intersection and not even think twice about it.
Right.
But it's up to me to kind of hold him back to make sure we don't get run over by a car
Never
or
even
something
thought
like
about
that.
that when they're getting in the sniffing mode and they're going through all this stuff like that. They're not looking around. They're legitimately on the trail. They're on the scent.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you first thing in the morning when you get up, nobody talks to me or bother me until I get to that coffee.
Coffee going, babe.
Get me to that coffee. It's the same thing. All your senses are out except your nostrils. You're like, I got to smell that coffee.
Right. No, it's so true.
I mean, it's the same thing. But now that I can't take him with me everywhere,
Right.
it bothers me.
Yep.
It legitimately bothers me, and even though I'm not doing the job anymore, I lose that sense of I lose that safety blanket of having him with me. That there'd be times that we'd be working and we'd sit in the cruiser and I'm typing something up on the laptop, and all of a sudden he'll start growling or something behind me, because somebody's walking up to the car.
Mm.
And I'm so focused on trying to get this report done and everything, but he's always keyed up and ready to work.
Right.
And that could become a life or death situation. I
Right.
mean, the last few years, cops are getting ambushed left and right.
I know.
And who knows, one of those times could have been my ambush, and he saved me from it. But thankfully, I was able to to end my career and move on. So I'm thankful for that, and
And
I just
how
wish
long did you
that
serve police? How long were you in the
I
police
would
force?
I was in for 19 years.
19 years. Wow.
19 years, yeah, Yeah.
You were up
Yeah.
on retirement age anyway, right? So there wasn't any like I was always I know in our conversation we were having coffee together over at the Aroma Joe's, little plug for
Mhm.
local amazing coffee place that we go to all
Amazing
the
coffee.
time. Yeah. So I know that I figured I thought for some reason it was a little bit less than that because I thought that maybe you got to a point where you're like I'm able to retire, but you did 19 years in the police force and you said was it 13 in the military? Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Wow, man. So you have served a lot for this country and for the people of the country, and I think that that's although I know that a lot of times whenever people say it to me, the time that I've served or my dad or whatever else, we're always like, "Yep, it's just what we do." You know, what I mean, that's just kind of where we're at with it, and it feels kind of strange when people do. But I've come to the place in my life where I'm, I want to make sure that I celebrate in people that do things voluntarily to be able to serve others and their country and whatever else to be able to move that forward. I think that that's important because a lot of times the sacrifices that military make and the police make is astronomical compared to what other people have to go through in their lives. The sacrifices, the time, the energy, the loss of life, the loss of friends, all those things that you have that are all around you all the time can really start to wear it down. And I know that you and I have had conversations around what it can do to you mentally. And I know that's something that you're passionate about, which I'd love to be able to have you talk a little bit about, is
Yep.
around what you do mentally to be able to get through some of the stuff that you've been through, right? Whether it's PTSD, whether it's images, whether it's the wartime or police. Tell me a little bit about that. I know that this would be a great time for you to be able to just kind of open it up to what you're passionate about around that kind of set, because you do a lot of mental health stuff. So I want to make sure that we are celebrating that and talking about that.
Yeah. No, it's the mental health side of things is the toughest part of everything. And what makes it the toughest part is because first off, you still have a job to do.
Right.
Um, and but on top of that, when you suffer, your family suffers too. A lot of the jokes that we have as veterans are what we call the dependas. The wife or the husband and the kids that are like, "Thank me for my service." And for a while, I was like, that's so ridiculous."
Yeah.
But after going through tons of different types of therapies and everything to get my head right, I learned that a lot of the stuff that my wife or my kids went through was just as bad as what I went through, if not worse, because those situations that I get put in, whether it's an overseas tour in Iraq or kicking in a door to go after somebody that almost beat their wife to death or something. It's a job that I have to do that I'm trained to do, and I'm usually not doing that situation unless there's other people that are trained to do it, and yet the people back home think that everything's hunky dory, that, in 8, 12 hours, dad's just going to come walking through the door. But on a daily basis, there's a police officer that doesn't come walking through that door. There's a firefighter that doesn't come walking through that door.
Right.
There's a chaplain knocking on somebody's door because, their soldier, Marine, airman, or sailor didn't come home.
Right.
Um, and that's tough. That's really like, I'm more than happy to serve. I could never be a dependent. I couldn't do it.
No.
Um, but I started going to different therapies a few years ago. I started doing a one-on-one for a little bit. It
Were
didn't
you
really
always
work
open to
out.
therapy, or was it something you had to decide later on? Like I know that we always talk about how the macho mental mentality of a man is like, I don't need therapy, I don't need any of that stuff. But were you kind of like that at first and then opened up to it, or were you always open to therapy and stuff like that?
I was not always open to it.
Right.
When I started in the police field, it was still that whole thing of, if you have a shitty day at work, you go home and spend some time with Dr. Daniels. We'll see you tomorrow. That type of thing. And going home and drinking away your sorrows and everything is just not the way to do it. And a lot of people get caught up in that. I've seen good police officers that have lost their career because of a DUI, or they get into a fit of rage because they're so intoxicated, or something like that. But what stems, like, the pinpoint reason for all that is all the crap that they go through with their career, and they've got no outlet because of that little stigma that, when I first started, if you come to your chief or whatever and say, hey, I'm not having a good day mentally, like I'm thinking of hurting myself or something like that, you are now putting a bullseye on your back that you are now a liability.
Right.
They're going to take your gun away. They're going to take away your powers. They're going to fire you, et cetera, et cetera. And that still happens. It's just a lot less now. But
Well, it's probably not even
probably,
a lot less, but it's more so because we as a society, like in general, have come to understand that everybody from little kids all the way up to the top of being whatever age that you are, we're all broken in one way or another. There are
yep,
things that happen to us. We're all fractured in different places. And the fact of the matter is that we've just kind of brushed it off and we just kind of said, shake it off and do what you got to do. Or maybe they just titled it with whether it's senility for being old or whether they talked about just kind of a wild child when they're little kids or whatever, when really they never really got to the root cause. So I feel like we're starting to turn the page of that, but we're just not there yet. But in the military or anything, my sister tells me even in the police force, they're really starting to hunker down to let's get you help that you need actually versus, hey, suck it up or you're fired, or if you're
yep,
a liability to me now. Right. So to
yep.
your point, I think they were forced to, but
Mhm.
in all actuality, it's a really good thing that they are. Hopefully we can be even better than what we are right now,
Oh, it doesn't matter how perfect you got it. There's always room for improvement. There's no
Right.
no denying that. But um, yeah, I went to a call in 2019, um, involving an out of control 17-year-old kid. And as a salty veteran police officer, um, you hear one of those calls and you're like, oh my god, like have you ever just thought about spanking your kid or taking the phone away, or hit it with a stick a couple times? I'm not going to raise somebody else's kid. And I was already on overtime when this had happened. um, and I was on my way home, and when the call came out, we had just done shift change. I was working for the local sheriff's office, and it was right in the middle of our county, which I happened to be driving through. And it's a small community that did not have a full time police department. And the two other deputies that had just signed on were literally the top and the bottom of the county.
Mm.
So they were easily a half hour away, and I was less than 10 minutes away. So I called the on duty supervisor and said, "Listen, like I think I'm the closest unit. I'm within 10 minutes of there. I can shoot over and at least try to get the scene under control until you get there." And she's like, "Yeah, yeah, if you don't mind." I was like, "All right." So I start heading over there, and dispatch is like, there's a lot of yelling and everything. It sounds like it may be starting to get physical or whatever. And I remember thinking in the back of my mind, good, I hope she's beating him with a frying pan at this point. And um, then I could tell by the sound of the dispatcher's voice that he's like, um, the what do you say? Something to the effect of the caller doesn't have the phone anymore, but the phone is still live. Like I can still hear everything that's going on as if the caller dropped the phone.
Right.
And it does sound like it's getting physical. I can hear, it sounds like stuff being broken in the house. And I was like, okay, I guess the fight's on. So I step it up and get there as quickly as I can. And while we're doing this, dispatch is updating us, and it is progressively getting worse. When I showed up, there was another officer that was working part time for a neighboring agency, and he showed up right behind me. And we got onto the road. It's a very small road that has probably 10 houses on it. And of course, none of them have a house number. So we had to waste a whole bunch of time spotlighting cars,
Oh, just
running
trying to
license
figure out which house it
plates.
was. Yeah.
Yep, yep, trying to run license plates to make sure we got the right address. And we finally found the house, and we were told that there was like screaming and yelling, that there's stuff being broken, there's a dog barking hysterically in the background. We show up to this house, and it is eerily silent.
Mm.
Like I thought we were at the wrong house. I was like, "There's no way this is the same house." We knock on the back door. There's nothing. There's no dog barking. And I was like, the car in the driveway comes back to the caller, so this has to be the house. So we knock louder, and a teenage boy opened the door, and he's completely nude and covered in blood.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh my God, like, somebody broke into this house. He's a victim as well. I can see bare feet on the floor. As soon as you walk in the house, to the left is the bathroom, and then it just opens up.
Yeah.
And I can see on the floor bare feet, and it looks, by the position of the feet, you could tell they were laying on their stomach. And I was like, something is not right. So we pull him out of the house, and then he starts to fight us. And that's when it kind of clicked, where I'm like, oh my God, like this isn't a victim. This is our suspect.
Right.
Something's not right. So, and he's a scrawny kid. Like I said, he was a 17-year-old kid. And me and this other officer were not small. And this was in February. We had to throw him in the snow, and literally pig pile on top of him, and get the handcuffs on him. And then he's fighting us all the way to my cruiser. We throw him in the back of my cruiser, go back in the house, and that's when I find the caller is face down. Not to get too graphic, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of blood in there and everything. And I found out that she was no longer among the living, and there's literally nothing I could have done to bring her back.
Right.
And so I go into robot mode at this point. We get on the radio. We're like, we need to call the Red Cross. We need to get major crimes here. We need to get blah, 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 blah. And, it's just this mental checklist that you go down.
Yeah.
And I end up, because the ambulance refused to transport this kid for what we now have him in custody for. He still had to go to the hospital, get checked out. He did end up cutting himself a couple times, so he was bleeding pretty good in the back of my cruiser. So I took him to the local hospital, and I was up there with him, got him restrained and everything, until some of the local major crimes detectives showed up at the hospital. And they're like, all right, like, you're good to go. And because now major crimes has taken it over, I immediately have to go and type up my report so that they can look over what we witnessed when we first got there, what we heard, and all that other stuff. And I leave the hospital, and I'm in the cruiser by myself. And I just remember thinking, something is not right. And I couldn't place it, to the point that I even called my wife and was like, I don't know what it is about this call, but something's really got to me, and I can't pinpoint it. Like, I don't understand what my feelings are. I don't know if I'm upset about this. I don't know if I'm excited that, I ended up, calling a murderer. Like, I have no idea. Because it's just such an emotional
Right.
roller coaster.
All over the place.
And oh yeah. And my sheriff ended up calling me, because obviously we notified him of what was going on. And he's like, hey, like, how are you doing? I go, I honestly don't know what it is, Sheriff, but there's something about it that just doesn't feel right. He's like, well, you're not Superman. Like, something like this is going to mess you up a little bit.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, well, I got to go type up my report and everything. And I had a hard time focusing on typing up my report, because the images and everything just kept spinning in my head. And it was recommended that I go and do some therapy. So I went to this amazing therapist that she's on like this post-traumatic stress council and all this other stuff. I mean, she's brilliant.
And she probably deals with a lot of police and things like that, right? Yeah.
That's her specialty.
Yeah.
Yep. Is first responders and veterans. And I sat down with her, and she immediately, after the first sit down with her, she diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress, or severe post-traumatic stress, which later now has become chronic, because I still have it. And she took me out of work for a while, and the one-on-one with her probably went for a year and a half. And she was wonderful. I felt like she was helping, but it didn't fully close the door. So I branched out, and I went to equine therapy. So I got to work with horses, and that helped out a lot. I still do it occasionally to this day.
Why did that help so much? Why did equine therapy help so much?
Well, I'm definitely afraid of horses. So doing equine therapy took my mind off of everything else because I was worried about getting kicked by a horse, stepped on by a horse, thrown off of the horse. I've seen all these horrific injuries that have happened to people that have ridden horses. And I'm like, I'm not the Marlboro man. Like, I'm not just going to jump on this horse. This horse is going to be like, whatever you say, I'm going to do. I jumped on this horse and was just like this the whole time. They're like, just relax. I was like, it's an 1,800-pound beast. I'm 190 pounds. I'm not going to relax.
Yeah.
I could tell the horse go right, but the horse will look at me and go, I don't feel like it.
What
am I going to do? What am I going to do?
Exactly.
But horses are so intuitive to what their rider, their handler is going through that at one point I bonded with this horse. His name is Mac, and I'll never forget him. And I bonded so well with his horse that I felt like he was a big dog. So I ended up, kind of putting my arms around this horse's side, and I put my ear up to the side of his chest. And I just sat because they're like, just sit and listen to him breathe. Like it's incredible. And before I realized it, my heartbeat was matched with the horse as well as my breathing. And just listening to the horse and everything, just being around this gigantic beast that is so gentle, I was able to actually relax and forget about the world for a while.
That's amazing.
Yeah, horses, dogs, like they have true healing powers. I firmly believe that.
I agree 100%. And I absolutely want to keep on going with it. But to be honest with you, that's exactly, there's a lot of different people that listen to the podcast that will ask questions like, with therapy, if therapy didn't work for me, what I love to hear your story you just talked about where your therapist did work for you, but it didn't close the chapter for you. It didn't really heal some of the things that you're trying to be able to move forward with, get to the root cause and the core and those kind of things. And then you try something different. And I think that it's something that everybody that's listening to this podcast or watching it on the video screens literally should know. If one doesn't work for you fully capacity where you need to go find something else. Take the effort and the time to go do something different. There's many different options that are out there. Now, mind you, there's a lot of people going to therapy, so it's kind of hard to get in a lot of different places. But continue to try to travel this journey and figure out what works for you. Don't just give up on the one and just go, all right, I'm all set. Therapy doesn't work. No, because there are different avenues. So I just wanted to share that. Equine is one that I've heard a lot about. I've never done it because I also am scared out of my mind of horses. It's funny that we have that in common. But for me, regular therapy has worked a lot for me. Group therapy has worked a lot for me as well with other people that are in the same situations that I've been through, or veterans, or those kind of things really helps me out. So go ahead, continue now. So you went to equine therapy.
Yeah. So the equine therapy for the most part is put on by a bunch of, nonprofits. You may be able to, because of course we live in tiny little New England. There may be people that are listening to this in Texas or something like that actually has farms where that's what they do, which is awesome if you do. But I never wanted to go to group therapy because I always thought that I'm going to go to group therapy and there's going to be somebody that's worse off than me. So why am I going to take a seat, or my story doesn't compare to theirs, or, whatever. But I have a friend, and I met him through TikTok, and we've become very, very close. On TikTok, he goes by Polly Paul. For those that don't know him, he's got over 3 million followers. He was shot in the line of duty 8 months out of the academy. He was shot twice in his dominant arm. Had to medically retire, and he's still. This was what, 5 years ago? 4 or 5 years ago. I think it was 4 years ago. August 1st was his alive day. And he's still on the mend. He's still trying to get full use of his right hand back, his right arm. Paulie was telling me that he went to, a friend of his turned him on to this, what they call a badge meeting. And it's kind of like group therapy. But it's not group therapy. What it realistically is it's a bunch of first responders that are having a bullshit session,
right?
Where we each take our turn. We go around the room and we talk about how's the week been for you? What struggles are you going through right now? How can we help you? That type of thing. And I went for probably a solid 6 months every week,
Hmm.
every week. And I've since kind of scaled it back a little bit because I'm starting to I've picked up a whole bunch of tools to try to fix myself, to try to help myself.
Right.
I'm certainly not out of the woods yet, but I'm in a much better place, especially mentally. And
And
um,
why do you think that is? Why do you think you're in a better place mentally? Is it because I always ask this question with anybody that goes to therapy or goes to these different things. Do you think it's because of your consistency with doing it, or do you think it's more so you were ready to accept it? You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of people will say, if I'm not, I can go to it over and over and over again. If I'm not really getting what I need to, eventually it'll click. I'm like, well, if you're not open and receptive to everything you're really trying to work towards and trying to be able to open yourself up and become vulnerable, a lot of times therapy doesn't work a lot of times with that, right? You got to be able to open up and really bear yourself back. I feel.
mhm.
How do you feel about that? Do you feel that is more about the consistency of where you were going to different session, or you were doing different things all the time, or is it more of it finally clicked for you to be able to go, hey, you know what? I really do need to, you know what I'm saying? Like it's
Yeah,
just interesting to find out when that turning point is for people.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's like it, it it's a step program. You go to therapy. Like the very first step is admitting that there's something wrong with you, and you need to get some help for it. That's step number one. And then from that, step number two is accepting that you should go and get some therapy, no matter what it is. Step number three is trying to find a therapist or a group or a program.
Right.
And then the hardest step is step number four, and it's making that phone call and getting that appointment. Step five is going. Step six is being open and accepting of the therapist or the group that you're with. And then the steps just go on from there. It's not one of those things where, you know, and it doesn't matter. It's not like if you have, you know, post traumatic stress is like pregnancy. You're either pregnant or you're not. You're not a little pregnant. You're not a lot of pregnant. You either have post traumatic stress or you don't.
Right.
End of story.
Yep.
And I've learned that no matter how severe this post traumatic stress is, um, we're all built different. So something that could be really severe for me, like for you, Shane, could be like, I don't know why he's freaking out about this, and
Right.
vice versa. Because we're all different. Um, it's the average American citizen will see somewhere around 10 to 12 critical incidents in their entire lifetime.
Hmm.
Whether it's a fatal motor vehicle crash or a store getting robbed or something like that. The average 20-year police officer will see over 800 in 20 years.
That's insane.
It's
That's insane.
ridiculous, but that's literally what our job is to do, is to go to these critical incidents.
Right.
That's literally our job.
Right.
And
You do the things that I won't do. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
literally, I won't jump in to that situation because I don't have the mental capacity nor the courage to be able to do so with the fact that you do. But a lot of times, what's interesting, you say that because my sister tells me this all the time. I talk to her about a lot of her fellow officers that she's lost over the years, especially to suicide and stuff like that. And
Yep.
she tells me all the time that unfortunately they may put on the brave face and they're some of the best cops that she knows and everything else, and they work hard and they seem like they got it all together and they're really all put together. But when they get behind closed doors and the demons start going and the quiet starts happening, you legitimately sometimes, if you're not getting the help that you need and really trying to at least push that forward, it ends up such an unfortunate situation. And I talk to her all the time about it, and she's like, man, sometimes it used to come as a shock to me, but now it doesn't
Yeah.
anymore because it's just a common thing now. It's like one of those things of we go through so much and we're under so much pressure. And like you said, 800 critical incidents that you've seen, much like you're walking in on that young man covered in blood, naked, and whatever else. These are traumatic experiences that normal human beings probably shouldn't be seeing. You know what I mean? They just shouldn't be. And so you do, and now you need help to be able to get there. So at the end of the day, I really wish that we could, and I know that this is something you're passionate about too. I wish that we could come up with something, as we talked about at the coffee store, is to be able to come up with something to be able to really truly get to the root cause and really help these individuals. I do feel like we're moving the right direction with a lot of different help and stuff like that, but we're not there yet. And we're going to lose more because the intensity is picking up more and more and more, as we go through time, whether it's through media and through social and phones and cameras and whatever else. So I really feel like we need to stay ahead of that game, because there's a lot of really amazing individuals that are in our first responders throughout the whole entire world and country that need help, and we need to help them as much as we can. You know what I mean? It's just unfortunate.
Yeah, well, it's funny because when I first started in law enforcement in 2004, we didn't have smartphones. Social media wasn't a thing.
Right.
Nobody had phones that could take pictures or whatever. And even if you did, there's nowhere to put it,
Right.
And nowadays you can't escape it. You've got Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, oh God, I mean, Snapchat, all sorts of stuff. We are so connected now than we have ever been in the history of humanity.
Right.
And it's ridiculous. So there's no way to escape it. Even if I had a rough day at work or something, and I want to get on TikTok and just look through a couple videos to make me laugh or whatever, there's going to be other videos that I'm going to look at and go, oh my God, because I was a canine guy, and that's kind of how my popularity grew, is not for me, but for my dog.
Listen, because of you, man. Come on.
Listen, I'm only relevant because I got a cool dog. That's it. But recently there was a canine officer, and I can't remember where. I want to say it was in it was in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Yeah.
There was a fleeing vehicle that slammed into the side of his cruiser, and a couple people sent me the video of that, and I expected it to be like a typical canine video where someone's going to get out and run, and you're going to see the fur missile go after him, and yes, got another bad guy. But what happened was the vehicle came through an intersection, slammed into the driver's side of this cruiser, and you could hear the dog whimpering and whining, and the dog is still in critical shape right now.
Wow.
Not dead, at least the last update I got. But it's like, that's the last thing I wanted to see right now, because I've literally had panic attacks at work, because I was afraid somebody was going to rear end my cruiser and hurt my dog. And the thing is that I never really thought about this until a friend of mine lost one of his former partners. That we all know what the end result's going to be.
Yeah.
And it's only a couple years away. So you build this bond with this dog that is absolutely unbreakable, and it's a bond like nothing else out there.
Right.
Just to know that in a few years you're going to have to put this dog down, or the dog's going to give his life for you. You look at Canine Kit in Braintree, Massachusetts. Took a bullet for his handler and ultimately, paid the ultimate sacrifice.
Right.
That gives me anxiety really, really bad.
And I love the bond. Like, I know you, I've known you for a while now, and I see the bond that you have with Pharaoh, and I also see the bond that my neighbor has with his dog Deacon, and there's all these other my sister knows a few canines, and and the bond there is immeasurable, and it's something that you can't describe. It's just something that you really can't get into, except for the fact that this is your best friend and your partner in crime, and the things that you do and see amongst all others. Imagine, like, in a situation where you might have seen some really, really like gnarly stuff, some really, really bad stuff, right? And your dog is there afterwards, even in the decompression time a little bit, to be there for you, even during that time, because I this comment that my buddy Scott came in here and showed, I'm gonna show it to you real quick. He said, I believe dogs know when you're happy or sad. They know by your body energy. And he says, I'm sure the horses do too, when he was talking about equine. He's
Yep.
exactly correct. Dogs know these things, and they know, and especially when you have the bond that you have that's so tight with Pharaoh, like legitimately probably knows, okay, you're on 10. I need to come in there and kind of help out a little bit, right? Or whatever else
Yes.
that's there. And I think that's amazing to me. It's unspoken because dogs can't speak except for they bark and they do they speak in their own way, right? But and at the end of the day, I think that it's incredible and amazing, and I'm so glad that some of these dogs are used in for such good things, and to be able to either protect and serve, but also to be, like you said, I really do hope, and I do want to, before this podcast is over, to find out ways that people can help you out to be able to get Pharaoh to become a service dog, like you said, to be able to raise some money and stuff like that. We'll get that in just a minute before we end the live or before we end the podcast and stuff like that. But I love the bond, and I think it's amazing, and it's important. And part of your healing, I think, Sean, probably is because of Pharaoh, right? Because
Yes.
of where you're at with it, whether it's mental health, whether it's you going to therapy, which are all great things. But Pharaoh is an important aspect of that, and I think that that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, when I made the decision to get out of law enforcement, obviously, 20 or 25 years is when people hit the end of their career and they retire. I'm in the process right now of going for a medical retirement because of my post-traumatic stress that I've gotten. I've got, severe anxiety, severe depression. Um, the 1 year anniversary after that homicide, I made an attempt on my own life.
Right.
And that's when I realized that I need to do more than just this one-on-one therapy. I need to go to programs. I need to take care of myself because I wanted the images, the sounds, I wanted it all to stop.
Right.
But I didn't want to leave the earth. I didn't want to die. I just wanted this stuff to stop.
Right.
And one-on-one didn't work. Being in this tiny little area, we're not New York City, we're not Los Angeles or Dallas. Like we don't have these groups all all over the place
Right.
that we could just join. Our mental health therapy sessions here, whether it's one-on-one or groups or whatever, are vague. There's not enough mental health providers. There just isn't.
I agree.
So I ended up going to there's a place in Massachusetts there's a hospital called McLean Hospital, and they have a first responder program there. It's a 2 week residential program, and the night that I made the attempt, I called my therapist and said, I'm in crisis. And she went, oh shit. And she made a couple phone calls and I drove myself there. I mean, from where I live, it was about a 2 hour drive. I packed a bag and I drove myself there. I didn't want to be there because I was treated like I should be in a straitjacket and in a padded cell and everything. But that's just the intake, just to make sure that, those thoughts and everything have passed. And
Right.
then I got into this program and I met firefighters and police officers, and some of them are also veterans. And I bonded with these guys. And so I went through this program, but I wasn't alone.
Right.
I went with somebody that was just as screwed up as I am. Some worse, some not as bad, but we're all screwed up and we all went through this together and we had each other's back. We were there to talk to one another. And that really, really helped out. And that was kind of the start of me coming out of this darkness that just followed me. And it never fully went away. I'd be lying if I said that, some days I would wish this stuff would just stop.
Right.
But I'm at this phase right now where I'm not quitting.
Right. It doesn't go away. You're learning how to navigate it. You're learning how to navigate it. It doesn't go away. because I don't think it ever will. None of our issues really go away. It's just how do you navigate and how do you process and how do you manage, and those kind of things are probably more important than anything, you know?
Yep. Yeah, but there's so many different therapies out there, Shane. You know, you've got the one-on-one, you've got the groups, you've got music therapy, you've got recreational therapy, you've got oh my goodness. I mean, there's so many out there. Like all you have to do is get on the old Google and look it up. And then while you're looking this stuff up, you should be able to find something within an hour or two of where you are, no matter where you are. Unless you're in Alaska, good luck. But there's so much stuff that's out there. And my thing is that if something's not working, don't give up on it. Don't give up on yourself.
Yes.
Find something else. You know, if you're hungry and you eat a sandwich and you're still hungry, are you just going to stay hungry? You're going to make another sandwich. You know,
Right.
If you're tired or not, are you going to have another cup of coffee? Of course you are.
Of course I am.
Of course you are. But you can't give up. Once you start making that step, don't give up. Even if you feel like you hit a wall, there's always a way around that wall. And I had to learn that the hard way. And my thing right now is I'm trying to talk with the commandant of our local police academy to see if each academy class I can go up there. I mean, granted, I'm not a licensed therapist or anything like that. I'm just a screwed up individual that's been able to find his way kind of out of the darkness and accept the fact that getting help is not a bad idea. It's not the worst thing you could ever do. It doesn't make you weak. In my eyes, if you're somebody out there seeking therapy and stuff, you're a lot stronger than you think you are.
Mm-hmm.
You're more courageous than you think you are, because that's a huge step.
It's huge.
It really is.
Can I say
So
this?
I want to.
I will say this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Though, I feel, and this is just my own opinion, a person that has been through it, that is now a therapy or in therapy, or, you know, actually decided to go down the road of being a therapist or go down the road of being somebody that's there, a person that has been through it from top to bottom, I feel is a much more relatable therapist in my mind. And I get more from them because they can relate to me a whole lot more. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of really amazing licensed clinical professionals all that have trained all their lives to do all this stuff. And I get that. But when I my latest therapist that I have, he's a veteran as well. And he's a dad. And he has he had some, his kid had some issues and different stuff like that. So there's very much some commonalities between the two of us. And what I felt is I felt like I got so much more from this therapist. So my point that I'm trying to make to you is that even though you'd say I'm just a guy that's, you know, broken and trying to be able to, you know, figure whatever it out, I guarantee you the impact that you could make if you did decide to go down the road of going, you know what, I need to be somebody that's licensed in this area to be able to be somebody that can give advice in a way that is, like, I don't know, legally or medically, you know, the right way to do it. But for you to be able to sit down with them and say, I get it. I understand it. I know. I feel it. I've felt that. I've been there. I think that's so important. And we don't have enough of that, because if you just have a clinician that's in there, how are you going to know me going over IEDs and going over stuff in wartime and whatever else? How are you going to know all that stuff like that? You just know, you hear about it, but you haven't been there. And I think that your story and the fabric of your journey can really help a lot of people if really, really targeted the right way. I'm just saying. And it's probably because I like you so much. That's probably why I'm saying it too. But to be honest, I feel like it could really connect and help a lot of people. Just be honest.
I think so too, and I've thought about it. But the thing is, you know, a lot of people have heard the phrase, "If you can't help others, if you know, you can't help yourself." And I am not mentally in a position yet where I can start taking on other people's problems and their stories.
Right.
You know, I share my story. I've listened to other people's stories, and I'm okay with that. But to be committed to somebody that's got a lot on their plate, I don't have the capacity in a closet in the back of my brain to start storing other people's boxes of junk. So
You're still
until
trying to
I
clean
can,
yours out.
yeah, Yeah, it's still very, very full. So until I can figure that out, for right now, I offer people my advice based on someone that's been through some shit um, and has gone through a whole bunch of different therapies. Because for veterans out there that may be listening to this, there's a program in Boston, Massachusetts called Home Base. They're partnered with the Red Sox Foundation and Mass General Hospital, and it's a 2-week program where it's like going to school. They put you up in a hotel. So you're not, you get your own hotel room and everything. It's a real nice hotel. It's right next to the USS Constitution. And it's a good program. And there's a long waiting list for a reason because I think it works. And at the end of the program, you get to take your binder home, which I kid you not is about this thick. And all these tricks and tips and stuff and these programs or these what's the word I'm thinking of, the scenarios that they put you through, it's all in there. So if you ever are like, what was that thing that they taught me about, open the book, it's still there.
Right.
So it's a nonprofit. It doesn't matter where you live. If when I went, there was a guy in my group from Oregon, and he didn't pay a single penny to go there. They paid for his flights to and from. They
Wow.
picked him up from the airport. They paid for your hotel, which, by the way, is a Marriott. So if you have the app, you can collect the points. I'm just saying.
Nice.
But the food is wicked good.
I love it.
So when you go there, you eat breakfast at the hotel. You start your day going to these classes. They give you lunch. You can either eat lunch there, you can take it back to your hotel room, and then at the end of the day, like, you're free to do whatever you want. Me and a couple friends of mine, that we created a really strong bond. That this was back in oh, good Lord, when did I go there? I think it was like March, end of February into March, and me and two other guys really, really bonded strong, and we're still in touch. Almost on a daily basis today. We went and saw Rocky 3 at the movie theater, or whatever. Creed 3.
Creed, yeah. Yep.
Rocky 3 is about 40 years ago.
Listen, that's a long time ago.
That was a horrible one too.
It wasn't one of the good ones.
No. So we went out to the movies. There's a women's professional hockey team in Boston that I follow and support strongly. And I went to one of their games one night. So when they release you for the day, like, you do whatever you want, just make sure you're back in class.
Right.
So you're not treated like a patient. You're not, it's not technically an inpatient thing.
Right.
But I learned so much from that place. I really, really did. And I'm still in contact with some of the people that taught some of the classes and everything. I know of two other veterans that I met through like TikTok that are signed up, that are on the waiting list to get in.
Good.
But I highly, highly recommend it. Unfortunately, it's only for veterans.
Home base. I put it at the bottom in the thread. So there's one comment that I want to share with you real quick, buddy, that my buddy Scott had shared here. It said, "Hey, Sean, I've listened to your story, and I just want to say that you are strong, brother." It says you, and then it continues with, "You're on the right path." And I think that's why we're doing this. That's why I'm sitting right now with Sean right now. That's why when we go to Real Dudes Talk, is another YouTube channel that I'm going to be doing. We're going to bring you in on that too. A lot of guys just sitting around talking about stuff that guys aren't necessarily comfortable talking about, all the feelings and all the mushy gushy and the ew gross stuff. Legitimately, we need to have outlets and forums to be able to talk about this stuff. So you'll see more of Sean as we continue to move forward. But Sean, I'm really, really, really super glad you're here with me tonight to be able to have this conversation. We're going to wrap it up here in a few minutes. But if there's anything that you would see, let's say, for instance, one of the questions that I like to ask a lot of the different people that I'm interviewing, after all the stuff that we're talking about here, therapy, all the stuff of mental health, getting the help that you need or whatever else, if you were to see yourself in 5 years, what would be a dream thing that you'd be doing? So if you can imagine yourself doing something, whether it's in this space or whatever, where do you see yourself in 5 years on this journey that you're on right now?
Well, in a perfect world, in 5 years, I would like to be able to either travel to various first responder agencies, police departments and fire departments, police and fire academies, and be able to talk to the new recruits about um, accepting mental health help, and it doesn't make you weak. And that if you want to keep that homeostasis, if you want to stay in your Zen or whatever you believe in, you have to be willing to talk to people. You have to find an outlet to get all this crap out of you. And that's what I would like to do. Is I'd love to tell my story to people. I'm not afraid to talk about it. I'm not ashamed of it anymore. So that's what I would like to do.
That's a huge step. That's part of your healing, though, man. I love that. And your growth, if you think about it, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I know it sounds cheesy when you say if you could park in the space, get a little uncomfortable, and do the things that you have to do to grow and just become better, right? Like whether it's mentally, whether it's as a human being or whatever. I'm proud of you, man. And if you're not, if you're in a space where you're not afraid or you're not ashamed or those kind of things to be able to do so, that's your next step, your next iteration of what this journey could be. I see sky's the limit of the people that you can help, I believe, because like I said, you're relatable, your story matters, and you've been through it. You've been through the muck and you've been through the mess. And I think that matters to a lot of people that are like, I'm not alone. Like I just need to know that somebody else out there has been through what I'm going through or knows what I'm going through. And that matters in this whole entire game, is to know that somebody else can relate to what you're talking about, you know?
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. So we're going to end out the live here, or the podcast here with Sean. Sean, any final words that you want to share with anybody or impart on anybody on the podcast?
Yeah. First off, thank you, Shane, for having me on here. That means a lot. Your friendship to me means a lot. And I'm so honored to be able to call you my friend. You do a lot of great positive stuff for people, and a lot of it you don't do on purpose, but you touch a lot of people, and I'm thankful to be able to call you my friend. On top of that, for anyone that's listening to this, don't be afraid to ask for help. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's the complete opposite. It's a sign of strength. It's a sign of courage. So when you feel like you've got no more fight left in you and you start reaching out for help, it's a whole different fight. And you've got plenty of fight in you. Don't give up. Don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on your family or your friends. Don't give up on your coworkers. Get the help that you need. If something doesn't work the first time you do it, try again. Find something different. Find a different therapist that you might relate to. Find a group that you can relate to. Find something. If you like to be outdoors, there's recreational therapy out there. If you like horses, there's equine therapy. If you like music, there's music therapy. There's not just one-on-one. Don't give up. Stay in the fight and never quit.
I could not have said that any better, Sean. Like I said, I'm proud of you, and keep that message going forward. You know, that's part of my message as well. Don't ever give up. Keep on leaning in. Keep on, find your circle, find your tribe, do the things that you have to do, and we can all do this together. So I appreciate you, Sean. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And if anybody, I'm going to put in the links, his information in the podcast itself. I'll put in the body of the podcast to show exactly where you can find Sean at or anything like that. And we'll actually discuss a little bit, maybe you and I offline, Sean, we can discuss ways that we can try to raise a little bit of money to get Pharaoh trained to be a service dog. I know Morgan had already said, maybe we could do another 12-hour live like you did the other day to be able to raise some money. Who knows, right? Maybe we can come up with some really good ideas to be able to do it. But if you got any information, Sean, or if there's a place that people can go to donate or give to be able to help out or anything like that, which I know that a lot of people don't want to ask for that kind of stuff, but that's okay. That's part of where we're at with everything. And I want to help out. I'll be able to put it in the body of the podcast when this does come out, audio format, to be able to help Sean out in his endeavors to get Pharaoh to be a service dog. But brother, I love you like a brother, and I appreciate you, man. And thanks so much for being here tonight.
I appreciate you so much. Thanks for having me, Shane.
Okay, bud.